Welcome back to the Harmless Podcast. Jared, it has been a minute. I know, I kicked into stealth mode for a bit. Now, if you haven't been over to the YouTube page, there are some interviews there that haven't made it to the podcast platforms just yet. But I need to begin by reminding you that we are diving into a topic that's new to the Harmless Podcast, and that is the topic of masculinity. I know there's plenty of podcasts on the subject, but what I'm hoping for with these interviews is to challenge us preachers to become more than just spiritual specialists. If you're anything like me, it's easy to get sedentary, fat, lazy, because so much of the work of a pastor can be reactive. So here's my warning. In the next few conversations, you're going to hear some topics that we don't often talk about. There's going to be some language that may offend you, but there's going to be some things that we can learn from everybody on here. So do yourself a favor and let these talks challenge you where you are weak. My guest today is J.P. Dinnell. He is a former U.S. Navy SEAL and now a leadership instructor with Echelon Front. He serves as the director of tactical training programs. JP spent almost 10 years in the SEAL teams with 3 combat deployments. During his time, he served as the point man, machine gunner, the lead sniper for Delta Platoon, opposite of, here's a name you might know, the American sniper, Chris Kyle, who was in Charlie Platoon. His time with the SEALs meant that he worked closely with officers Jocko, Willink, there's another name you may know, and Leif, Babin. And much of the time that he spent with them appears in Jocko and Leif's book called Extreme Ownership. Great book, by the way, if you haven't got your hands on that. Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. He was kind enough to sit with me and talk through some of his adventures on and off the battlefield. You're going to love this conversation. What a good dude. This is J.P. Dinnell. J.P. Dinnell, welcome to the Harmless Podcast.
What's going on, man?
Good to see you. Thanks for doing this.
You as well. Thanks for having me on.
Well, let me start by saying thank you for everything that you've done for the country. Appreciate that. All your service. You put in some time and some work, I hear.
A little bit. Good times.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. Yeah,
that's excellent.
Good opportunity.
Excellent. Well, here's the thing. This is a preaching podcast, and whether you know it or not, now everybody's going to come on here and they'll be like, "J.P. Dinnell's a preacher." I had no idea this guy was a preacher. I had no clue. J.P. Dinnell's a preacher. I didn't even know. No idea.
Oh, goodness.
I've been accused of a lot of things. I've never been accused of being a preacher.
You know, my nickname in boot camp was Preach.
Is that right?
Because I'd say a group prayer for the guys every night before we went to bed in boot camp. I was in my 6th day of boot camp when 9/11 happened. So there's a lot of fear and uncertainty in what we were doing. However, there was no fear and uncertainty for myself. I mean, obviously for what's happening with our nation, we just got attacked. It was horrible. But I knew that once I got done with boot camp and my schooling, I was going to San Diego to go to Buds to become a Navy SEAL. Like I knew that, right? And so I had a little more security in what was going on because I knew what my next steps were. But a lot of these guys that didn't join the military to go to war are now afraid that they are going to war. And so I grew up with very strict religious parents, grew up in church, but not strict religious like the bad version of that, to where like I rebelled against it and I hated it. I just, it's what we knew and that's what we did. And so when I was in boot camp, I was, reading my Bible every day, every night. And then I would say a group prayer for the guys before we went to bed. And then when we were deployed to Ramadi in 2006, we didn't go out on a mission unless I said a group prayer for the guys real quick. So it's kind of funny how you said that. And I'm thinking back, I'm like, wait, actually.
J.P. Dinnell is a preacher. We had no idea he was a preacher.
Nope.
Well, hey, here's one of the things that's really cool. And one of the reasons that I wanted to visit with you, other than all the work you've done with the Navy SEALs, all the work that you do with Jocko and Leif and Echelon Front, One of the things that I've read and that I've heard you talk about is the communication part. And you talk about having some obstacles to have to overcome to be a good communicator.
Yes.
And then you find yourself in that place to where now you're not just a guy with a gun. Now you're not just a guy that's setting up tactical operations. Now you're a guy who is standing in front of large groups of people as keynote speaker and conveying business and organization type leadership structure and tactics to massive audiences. So tell us about how you go from being this guy with a gun to now this front and center guy that's doing these speeches. What are some of the things you had to go through?
Well, honestly, that all started when I was in elementary school because I grew up with a speech impediment, and I was in speech therapy for all of elementary school. And I just had a real hard time putting my words together. I would slur my speech. I would mix up my words. To this day, I'll mix up my words. I'll make up words. That's really fun when you're on stage speaking and that happens. And nobody's aware of it, but like I'll do it and I'm like, dang. It just kind of like throws me off my game a little bit. But in junior high, I was pretty shy. Like I had my friends that would probably think that I wasn't shy, but I didn't really like talking to people I wasn't really close with. I was really small and short, so I was pretty insecure about that. I was real skinny. And then in junior high, then in high school, still kind of the same. Like I had my friends, but I wouldn't say like I had like a group. In high school, you had those little cliques and groups. I didn't belong to anybody, which now looking back, I'm like, cool, but it made it awkward, like I had my friends, but they always had their little core group, and I'd be like, cool, let me hang out with them. And I'm going to go hang out over here and here. It was just, I never really like fit into any one group. And at the time, like I just said, it wasn't comfortable for me. Like I didn't like the breaks or lunch breaks because I never felt comfortable. I was always like super tense and had anxiety. I don't know why. I have no idea. It's just, how it was. And then I go into the military and, communication is key, and I learned that from day one in boot camp. Like, if your directions are not clear, and if you're not clear with your directions, then you're going to have some issues and some problems. And then going through BUDS to become a Navy SEAL, BUDS is a basic underwater demolition SEAL training that we go through. And it's very tough, intense training. There's about 222 guys in my class when we started, and I was one of 28 of the originals that graduated. So it's a high attrition rate. It's just a lot of hard physical training, and there's obviously the intellect side to that, and you have to pass different tests and be proficient with different things. And that's when I started to learn that, or I started to see the impact of leadership, right? Good leaders, bad leaders, good communication, bad communication. Just because you're talking doesn't mean that you're a good communicator. And that's what I realized is just because someone's always running their mouth doesn't mean that they're good at communicating.
Yes.
They could be totally throwing things off.
Yeah.
And I was in a position of leadership, like at a very young age. I was going through BUDS. I was only 19 years old, right? 19, 20 years old. And I got put in a position of leadership where I was a boat crew leader. And that was normally for officers. But for whatever reason, like within the height line, we had this little group of guys in a boat crew. And I was a senior ranking guy out of that group, which is crazy. And then all of a sudden now I'm the boat crew leader. And I was just trying to, recreate what I was seeing from other good leaders. Trying to not do what I was seeing that was bad from like bad leaders, and just remember what my father and mother had taught me about leadership and just, leading our family and leading, my dad out on job sites and whatever I saw have with my parents and different family members. And so I was just trying my best. And I realized that when I was able to communicate clearly to my guys, we were able to do much better. And, you know, I was young and I was immature and I would lose my temper and I'd get mad. And I realized that whenever I would do that, it didn't make anything better. So if all of a sudden now I'm, you know, trying to argue with somebody or I lose my temper, then they get defensive, right? And then, you know, and then that defense can be turned into an offense. And then all of a sudden now we're going back and forth against each other. And it just never was a good thing. You know, one of our leadership instructors, Jason Gardner, who I served with in the SEAL teams, he did 30 years in the SEAL teams. And yeah, just an awesome career. Let me find this. I want to find this. He just posted this quote last night, and I was like, oh, I'm stealing this. It says, when you show someone anger, they will instantly become defensive and then often offensive. You won't convince anyone of anything by yelling at them. And man, I wish I would have read that when I was 18 years old, 20, 21, you know, 31, 33, you know,
last
whatever,
Thursday,
35, last week, you know. Shoot, I wish I would have read that yesterday morning before I got upset. No, right. I mean, hey, human nature, you know, we have those emotions that God gave us.
Yeah.
You know, and it's up to us to use those emotions to our advantage, not to our disadvantage. Yeah. And that's the beautiful thing about God not being a puppeteer, right? He's not going to dictate what we do and how we do things. And it's like he gives us the ability to make our own free decisions, and which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And it can be a beautiful thing that turns bad. So, anyways, I just remember going through buds and just kind of realizing that. And then go through the advanced training. I check into SEAL Team 3, and I had a chief that was a horrible communicator. I mean, he was just one of the absolute worst people I've ever met in regards to trying to communicate. And like, if he didn't get his point, like if guys didn't understand, he'd just be like, you know what? And just like add in a bunch of words and like, you know, and his filler words then became like a bunch of cuss words. And you're like, you're an idiot. You're not making anything better. Right. Like, oh, now you dropped the F-bomb 3 times. Now I get it. Jeez, thanks for helping out.
It's a lot it's a lot clearer now.
Now I understand your jumbled information because you filtered it through the F-bombs. Like,
right.
Cool, I'm worthless. Oh, that's great. Now now that you said I'm a worthless piece of, you know, now I'm understanding what you asked me to do. And fortunately, we have some older guys in the platoon. We call them old guys. If you have like 2 or 3, 4 platoons, that would be like his filter. Be like, hey, what Chief is trying to say, or hey, what you guys need to go do. And they give very simple tasks. And guess what? People were able to understand, you know?
Yeah.
And then we're on our first deployment. He got fired. Thank goodness, because he was just a train wreck. Put another guy in position. His nickname was Pepper. The guy was a stud. I love Pepper. He's one of my top favorite SEALs that I ever got to work under and learn from. You know, he really helped me shift my perspective and mindset in regards to how fortunate we are to be able to do what we do. And even when we have the really crappy jobs, we're going to do them, and we're going to do them better than everybody else, and we're not going to complain. And that if we really stepped back and looked at that crappy job we were doing and found the good in it, that things were going really well for us. And that was always very unique, right? Because my first deployment, we were supposed to go overseas and do these capture kill missions. And then they switched it up before we deployed. And all of a sudden now we're doing like a week and a half of training to become prepared to go do these personal security detail missions overseas. And it's like, wait, hold on. You go from doing capture kill missions, like that's all we plan and prepare to do, to now all of a sudden we're going to do personal security. Yeah, we're going to be babysitting adults. I had a really crappy attitude about that. You know, because I had my roommate like in another platoon, like blowing open doors, getting in gunfights, doing capture kill missions, and I am playing bodyguard for the president of Iraq. I wasn't too thrilled about that. But Pepper sat me down. He had a nice little tune-up session with me, got my attitude right.
Yeah.
And then he sat me down and we sat in a car. It was one of our vehicles that we drove. And, he broke it down to me. And it really changed my perspective. And I felt really embarrassed. I felt really embarrassed afterwards that I had acted immature. I was, said stuff I shouldn't have said, and I was acting the way I shouldn't have acted. Yeah. One thing I learned from that conversation was how people react off of our attitudes, right? And they react off of our body language. And while I wasn't I was outspoken, as most of our guys were, about what we were doing, but it didn't take me saying it to everybody. It was the way I held myself, the way I was acting, and that was an early indicator for myself that, man, no communication is a form of communication as well.
Absolutely.
And, your body language, how you talk to people, interact with them, how you hold yourself is a big indicator. And people feed off that. That attitude is contagious.
Absolutely.
And you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of that. And so, that happened. And then we got back from that deployment, and then Jocko came in as our task unit commander. And, he brought in this mindset of extreme ownership, that we were going to own everything that affected our mission, affected the battle space, affected our training, our departments, our task unit, everything. We weren't going to complain, and we were going to build relationships with other departments and units that affected our mission, right?
Right.
And what did that take? Actual conversations, talking with people and departments, and instead of saying, this is what I want, this is what I want, this is what I need. Instead of constantly withdrawing out of that bank account that we have, right? We all have a bank account of leadership capital or capital with other individuals. And if all we're doing is withdraw, eventually that's going to run out. And so we all realized, some sooner than others, that we had to be building relationships with these other departments. And, I remember it was very powerful when Jocko was like, hey, if supply doesn't get us the gear that we need, that's actually our fault. Because that means that we didn't inform supply that we needed this gear for this block of training, and that it was critical to our success in training, which is critical to our success on the battlefield. So if we're not having those conversations ahead of time, if we're not building relationships, then that's 100% our fault.
Well, see, JP, here's the thing that I love about what you're talking about right there. And this is you. So part of what I'm trying to do with this next season for the podcast is this very thing, talking about what do men need to do when it comes to communication? How do they need to handle themselves? How many guys, and so let's talk Frank for a second. How many guys, they go to work and they have a situation with their boss. And so instead of going to the boss and saying, hey, we got a situation, they do something undercutting. They do something passive aggressive. Think about it in terms of your marriage. Dudes are super good at this. We are weak-minded individuals when it comes to our wives at times. And so one of the things that I've seen, I know I've fallen into it myself. I've heard a load of dudes come in and talk on a pastoral counseling level. I'll sit down with other couples. What you'll hear is a guy saying like, oh, why doesn't she want to initiate sex? Why won't she initiate this? Why won't she? And it's like, hold on a second. Hold on. Like, here's a conversation my wife and I had. She's like, are you upset? I'm like, yeah, I'm a little upset. Okay. Why are you upset? Well, because I've been hitting around at this all afternoon, and here we are. And she says, did you say it? I'm like, own it, Jared, own it. Just own the situation. Did you say it? No, I should have verbalized it. Okay, listen, I'm not a mind reader. How in the world would I know that, Jared? Like, because I think you should.
Exactly. Because we think they should. We think that they should understand when we're doing something or saying something that we want to have sex, or it would be nice. It's really funny we're talking about this, because I've had these same frustrating conversations with Amanda and whatnot. And I actually have had it with a handful of my buddies as well, because I don't know what, I understand kind of why, like a lot of my friends come to me to talk and advice because of kind of what I do now.
Yeah.
But, the biggest myth about communication is that communication actually exists. And what you were just saying is kind of like within that line, because you're like, hey, I've been hinting, I've been doing this. Why don't you understand what I want?
Mm-hmm.
Well, God made us to be two different people.
Right. Yep.
Women are women and men are men. That's the way it is.
Yeah.
There is no other option. It's a man or a woman.
Yeah.
And a man is a man, a woman is a woman. And we can't expect women to have the same thought process and tendencies that we do.
Absolutely.
Because we don't have the same thought process and tendencies that they do. And that's fine. So we need to be aware of our communication and, how we need to be more effective with it. I think the reason why we do this, Jared, is because for me, it used to be like, well, I mean, what, do you not want to? Like,
right.
Like, what's wrong? Like,
yeah.
Yeah. And then you kind of get into this.
Our phrase for it is filling in the blanks. So here's one of the things that we talk about in our men's group. We talk about filling in the blanks. So if there's a blank left, okay, so I've hinted at this, I've hinted at this, I've hinted at this over and over, and then she's not doing it. Okay, you don't have an answer on how she feels about you. You don't have an answer. You didn't ask a question, right? You didn't ask a question, so you don't have an answer for that. So here's what we do. We come along and we go, well, I'm going to fill in the blank. Well, she must be mad, or she must be angry, or she must not want to, or she must not find me attractive, or whatever it is. And we start filling in the blanks. And we do that all the time for other people. We just begin to assume things. It's like, hold on a second. You're filling in the blank on a story that's not even your story. You don't know how she feels because you weren't man enough to ask the right question. So why don't you nut up and ask the right questions, Exactly.
And so we talk with companies all the time. That's what I do, right? I'm a leadership instructor and speaker for Echelon Front, which is the leadership and management consulting company that Jocko and Leif started, right? So that was the first instructor they brought on 3 years ago. I mean, it's a ridiculous amount of companies I've had the privilege to work with over the last 3 years all across the world, right? Internationally as well. Right. And so sometimes, and Jocko talks about this on his podcast, and I believe he was talking with Peter Roberts from Origin about this. And this was when they first met and did their podcast interview together, announced their partnership. Jocko partnered with them in Origin and Origin Labs. And Pete was sharing, because Pete was sharing a story about when he had some problems with one of his companies. And Jocko was kind of dissecting it, and they were talking back and forth, and it came down to, it's like, hey, if there's some bad news, you need to share it with your team right away, because they're going to make up in their mind whatever they think, right?
Exactly right.
And it's like, do you want them knowing the truth, or do you want them making up to what they think the truth is?
And you always go dark. You always go with a more negative thing most of the time than what the truth actually is.
They don't. They have no idea what the truth is, right? Yeah. And, I also have to be aware, and so I've told some of my buddies, it's like, hey, man, yeah, you're in a good mood. You want to have some sex with your wife. Dude, that's great. Realize that your wife probably has so much other stuff on her mind. It's not that she doesn't want to have sex. It's that she is thinking about the 3 kids, if they have enough stuff for lunch this week, right? And the fact that one kid is behind on their homework, and that you're leaving for a work trip in 2 days and you're going to be gone for 3 days. And she's thinking about all these other things that's going on. Like, that's all the stuff they have in their mind, right? Now, you could just interrupt it and say, hey, we've got some time before the kids come home from school. Right. The last couple of nights you've been exhausted, you've fallen asleep. Is there any way, we get a little loving in? Yeah. And either they're going to be like, no, we don't have time, or I'm doing this, or they might just be like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, okay, you had the conversation.
Right. I mean, and there's
no difference between talking with your wife about having sex, or having a conversation with your kids about their bad behavior, their bad grades, or their good behavior, or their successes. Or if you're in a position of leadership, talking with your team, right, about what they're doing well and what they're not doing well. It's like the whole counseling situation when you have to counsel a member of your team. People don't have the guts to actually have that hard conversation.
Right.
And do hard conversations and hard situations, do they get better over time or worse?
Well, you're right.
They get worse.
Right.
So it's the same thing in regards to, like, guys, listen to this. And if you're struggling with your marriage, or you're not having enough sex, or you're frustrated with your wife, have the dang conversation. Because I promise you, it's not going to get better over time, because you are going to turn into a jerk towards your wife. You're going to hold animosity against her for no reason. And it's the same thing if you're in a position of leadership and you have a team member that's underperforming. If you don't have that conversation, you're going to start having animosity against them. And that breeds a toxic culture and environment for your team. You have to have the conversation.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Here's what my wife and I did. Now, here's what's going to be hilarious, JP, is this episode is going to come out, and it's going to be 18 episodes of preaching, and then all of a sudden it's JP Dinnell and Jared Ellis get together. What do they talk about? They talk about sex the entire episode. Like, it's going to be awesome. They'll be like, "What the heck? This podcast just took a weird turn." But let me tell you this. Here's what's really cool is, when you get in that place, especially once you get into, your 30s, your 40s, your kids start getting older, and then the schedule just tightens up, and you are going places all the time, and then you can't connect on that level. You can't connect on that level. Mm-hmm. My wife and I don't even remember where we heard this. We read this in a book, or we heard a lecture. I can't even remember what it was. We sat down one night, and I said, "Look, here's the deal. The day is exhausting, but me and you, we got to connect soon. We got to connect soon." And she's like, "I know." And I'm like, "You're exhausted. I'm exhausted. Let's set the alarm for 3:00 in the morning." And she's like, "Come again?" I'm like, "Let's set the alarm for 3:00 in the morning. That thing goes off. Me and you, we're getting our loving on. All right." And she's like, "Okay." Hey, instantly what happened was we're absolutely so excited to go to sleep. Like, cannot wait to go to sleep, because we have interrupted all of our exhaustion and all of our busyness to say, "Hey, 3 a.m., the alarm's going off. Hey, that's the starting pistol. All right. That's it right there. It's happening." And she's like, "That's excellent." And I can't tell you how many times when the schedule got tight, just by carving into the sleep just a little bit. And you know what's cool is the next morning we look at each other and it's just like, you know what? I don't know why, but I feel like we kind of got away with something last night. Like, I feel like that was exciting. Like, we just put something together because we sacrificed. And man, you're not going to miss that. You're not going to miss that sleep. That's just, that's excellent.
That comes down to our, I'm trying to tie this into like what we do, and the laws of combat that we talk about. The third one is prioritize and execute. You have to set priorities. You have to set schedules.
Wonderful connection.
And it's good. Now, what you don't want to do is make it to where it's like a structured thing.
Agreed.
Like, you want it to be where it's, hey, we've been running a gun and we're tired. Hey, tonight we're setting the alarm at 3. Not like every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
I'm with 100%.
Guaranteed. Like, I know I've heard this from a few people.
Right.
And for me, cool. Hey, if it worked for them, great. Guys, if you're doing this and it works, great. To me, it took away the intimacy.
Agreed.
Where you've probably heard this, so it's not going to shock you, but it really surprised me is, they actually had an agreement when they were getting married. We will have sex on these days. Like, no matter what, right? Like, we will have sex in these days. So a minimum, it gets better. A minimum time per week that they had sex. And so let's say it was Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Monday, Wednesday, or whatever, right? There's like 3 or 4 days in the week. So it's 3 days. If they had sex on one of the other days, that didn't take away from one of the scheduled ones. So it was a bonus.
That's ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
What in the world? That is insane. Absolutely. Yeah, I bet you that place is full of love, full of grace. I bet you it's just,
yeah.
You got a machine now. Now it's just a machine,
Well, that was the thing. I was legitimately concerned when my buddy told me this. And I'm not exact. I was legitimately concerned, and I'm like, man, like that's going to take away from the intimacy of your marriage, and where you're just like, I was like, what if she's not in the mood? He's like, it doesn't matter. Like, we have an agreement. I'm like, bro,
the rules are the rules.
Yeah, I know. Like,
what?
Yeah. we have rules for a reason. Okay.
That's insane.
I don't know, man. It threw me off. So,
that's it. And I love what
you know,
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it just shows the reason why somebody would feel that they need to do that is because they're not comfortable communicating with their spouse.
Oh, that's a good connection. Yeah, that's a really good point. And because it just doesn't. And you know, I think I've probably been guilty of that before, in the sense of, you know, here's a conversation we had. Jared, is it our sex life or is it just yours? And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, fair enough. You know, I mean, that I probably don't need to be as, you know, as hound dog, you know, treeing a raccoon as I am. Okay, I can probably dial that back. Yeah, it probably needs to be a little bit more passivity on my side.
And you'd be aware of that because you're able to have good conversations.
You're absolutely right.
And that means, like, if your spouse is able to say that to you, that means that she's comfortable communicating with you, and that's a good, healthy place that you want to be. I mean, great. Communication is key. You know, we talk about the laws of combat. That's how we lead, right? That's what we talk about in the book Extreme Ownership. So Jocko and Leif wrote a book called Extreme Ownership, right. New York Times #1 bestseller. It's an amazing book. And that helped me gain control of my life when I had completely allowed everything to fall apart, including my marriage and my family. What a lot of people aren't aware of is Amanda and I were divorced. We got a divorce and we were completely separated and everything, doing our own thing. And then I read Extreme Ownership, and it helped me start to understand and realize, like, you know what? All this stuff fell apart because of me, 100% me. And, you know, the cool thing about my wife also have read that book and, you know, listens to what we teach and preach, and, you know, has listened to the Jocko podcast. She's gone to the musters. Is, you know, she doesn't let me take 100% ownership of it, even though I'm like, no, it's 100% mine. She's like, no, that was equally my fault. Like, I did this. If we wouldn't have done this, this wouldn't have happened. If we would have done this, this wouldn't have happened. You know, and so we have a much better relationship because we learn, you know, how important that communication is.
Yeah.
And it's something that we struggle with all the time. But, you know, the laws of combat that they talk about in that book is, you know, the first one is cover and move. Cover and move is a gunfighting technique. But you know what that is? That's teamwork. That's working with each other, working with different units. And for couples, if they fail to work together, if they fail to learn how to accomplish goals and the missions together, and they're not arguing and they're not trying to do their own little things, they're not in their own little silos.
Oh, good.
You know, that's a dangerous place to be if you're not able to do that, right? So cover and move is the base of all the laws of combat because it requires teamwork. You have to be able to work with other people. And, you know, there's going to be silos, right? In a relationship, there's going to be like the silos and those walls that are built up between, you know, a husband and a wife because of a toxic environment, bad communication, somebody doing something where they lose trust or, you know, they damage that relationship. And so you have to be able to break down those walls to actually reestablish that relationship. And once you have a relationship, you have trust. Yeah. Our second law of combat is simple. You have to be able to simplify your communication. Yeah. Your communication has to be simple, clear, and concise. In the middle of a gunfight, I don't have time for a long, drawn out analytical game plan, right? I just don't. I'm going to get killed, right? Or I'm just going to be confused, or I'm going to hear 10% of all the stuff you're trying to say. Same thing when you're doing your mission planning. You have to be simple, clear, and concise. And you have to get clarification. You have to actually ask for clarification from your team to make sure they understand what's going on. You know, I just put a video out on Instagram and linked it to my Facebook about this. You know, Amanda asked me to go to the grocery store. I go to the grocery store, and I should have known, like, hey, you know, these 3 things she's asking me to get, well, the 3 things that I screwed up and didn't get right, there's multiple variations to what that means, right? Could it be this, or this? Right. Like, I'm talking 3 to 5 variations for each of those individual things. Well, I assume I come back, and she goes, that's my fault. I should have been more clear. So she's taking ownership of my screw up, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, actually, I should have asked for clarification, or I should have done what I do is where I'll FaceTime you at the store if I have a confusion, like, hey, which one of these things do you want me to get?
Yeah.
And like, there's 20 variations of the hot dog bun. Which one do we get for the kids?
Right.
And
well, that's super.
So
that's super.
Back to the store.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, I went back to the store and I got the right things, but I put a video out saying, hey, you have to get clarification. And it wasn't me blaming her for not getting, asking me. It was for me recognizing, hey, there are variations. There's things that could be not what I think it is. So I need to make sure I'm 100% clear. And we do that in mission planning all the time. And so this goes down to what we were just talking about with the spouses. I mean, I saw it from the grocery store. So how many other day-to-day, things do we run across when we're talking with our spouse or a member of our family or a member of our work or team at work or a member of our church or community or whatever, where we're not actually getting that clarification, and that ruins relationships. It ruins the environment, and then third law of combat is prioritize and execute. You have all these things that are going on. You have to set priorities. You have to actually detach from your emotions and look at the situation logically. How many times have you made a really good life decision when you're super emotional?
Never.
I have never, right? And I ask companies all the time, and I've never had someone go, yeah, I made a really good life decision. Literally, Jared, I have never had anyone like say, yeah, I made a really good life decision when I was emotional, you know? And it's because we don't make good decisions when we're emotional. We have to be logical. And so in order for us to be logical, we have to detach. And it takes time. It takes training. It takes conditioning to learn to detach. Because how many times has your wife made you so mad and you reacted and you said something that you're like, right? And then you just go with it because your ego's hurt, you're embarrassed, and you're like, I'm just going to come over the top instead of just like checking your ego and saying, hey, you know what? I'm sorry, right? We don't, most people don't do that. Most people don't do that at the beginning, right? Now, over time, hopefully you've learned to do that. I'm still struggling with it, but I am much better when I get upset and just saying, hey, you know what? I'm sorry. I was confused, blah, 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 right? And just, however, and just actually work through that conversation. And then the last one is decentralized command, and that's empowering everybody in your team to lead, right? And so if you have a family, you want your kids to be able to make decisions on their own. When you ask them to go do something, you want them to complete the task. Well, you can't just tell people what to do. You need to give them the what and the why.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of time that kids ask their parents, like, well, why do you want me to do this? And parents, what's their answer? Because I told you so.
Because I said so. Right.
Because I said so.
Yeah.
If I ever talk back to my parents like you are, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, dude, you just ever stop to think that maybe your kids are asking you why because they need clarification?
Yeah.
Because you failed to actually communicate with your kids about what they need to do, why they need to do it, and it's something new to them.
Right.
And so,
100% right.
It's no difference in business or with your family. Or your community or your church. It's all the same. And the thing that ties those laws of combat together is communication. Communication ties every one of those laws of combat together. And that's why communication is so important. And I learned that in the military. I learned that in combat, where we're in gunfights, where one of our guys was shot, bleeding out in the middle of the street. We have a force of enemy fighters maneuvering on us. And if it wouldn't have been for good communication, if it wouldn't have been for my leadership to actually be able to detach and assess what was going on, say, okay, I have 5 wounded guys in this courtyard. I have 1 guy that is critically wounded. If we don't stop the bleeding, get him out of here, he is going to die. Okay, get my corpsman over here. He's talking on 2 different radios, one for the the higher ups up the chain of command, and one for the other units in that area, and then talking to me and telling me that I need to go to the rooftop to set security and like all these things. If he wouldn't have been able to be stoic, we would have gotten guys killed. And we possibly could have gotten all of us killed because of the amount of enemy fighters that were trying to move on our position. But because we were able to detach and talk and communicate and then execute, we kept guys alive.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things, and you've done this several times already. And it was one of the things that I emailed you about. And I made up a word too when I sent you the email, and I said, you do a really great job of parabolizing, stories that happen in your life. Like, so you'll take an experience and then you learn how to parabolize it. Now listen, JP, you can keep saying all you want. I don't think I'm a preacher. Listen, you're starting to look more and more like the rabbi all the time. The more parables you start spitting, but you do. You have a really good ability to take a scenario and move it over there. So I understand what Jocko and Leif see in you as a speaker. In that, I appreciate it. Yeah, that's a really cool thing. You do a really great job at that. Yeah, I got a quick question on.
Yes.
On the detach part, just is there some steps or a scenario or maybe a process or a mantra that you go through in your head to help you detach? Because you get in the heat of an argument anywhere. What you want to do is fire back. Let me give you one, for instance. Like, my wife and I, we got in this argument, and what I really wanted to say to her, she's like, well, Jared, you do this and this and this. And I say, yeah. And in my mind, this is what's going on. And it's not true. It's not true, but I want to say it anyway because it's mean.
Oh,
that's,
yeah.
And so what I want to say to her is, well, I mean, you've never been around a real man. That's the main problem. It's like that's not true. That's not true. But, I don't know if you know this or not, but like dudes have testosterone. And so this is what you get. You've never been around a real man. So you don't know what this is like, and it's like, hey, that's not true. That's not true. Her dad's a good man. Her brothers are good men, but you just want to, in that moment, I have to detach. And so I pull myself back and I say, you've got to start distilling that because you can't say that. You can't say that.
Well, the reason,
what's your process?
So the reason, I would first recognize, and, this isn't what you want to hear, but this is the truth. The reason why you want to say that is because you're insecure.
Ah, good.
All right. That's the truth. Because guess what?
Yep.
I'm insecure about things. And when I'm insecure, I say some pretty mean things.
Yeah.
And, Amanda always says, she's like, God has given you an ability to speak, which is funny because I don't like speaking in front of people. Uh-huh. Well, I used to say that. And Jocko and Leif at this last muster were like, bro, you got to stop saying that. Like, you're speaking in front of all these groups and companies all the time. You do a good job. Stop saying that. And I was talking with another one of my buddies, Alan, who helps out on the musters, and he's a incredible man of faith. He always prays with me before I speak. And always praying for me and the family. And I said that and he agreed. He's like, yeah, you got to stop speaking that into your life. It's just not true. But I can get pretty mean, like evil with my tongue.
Yeah.
And it's scary. It's like it's a scary thing of like how quickly in my mind I can go, oh, well, if I say this, this, and this, like you're done. Like I will finish you, and you'll be contemplating why you're living this life still.
Right.
And that's not a good thing, man. That is not of the enemy.
Absolutely
100%, right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just have to be real careful with that. And so I realize that when I do that, it's because I'm insecure. 100%. It's a 100% insecurity, right? And so recognize that when you lose your temper, that's a sign of weakness because you're allowing somebody else's words or actions or the situation to dictate how you react. Yeah. You're not in control. And I remember when Jocko told me, he was like, hey, whenever you lose your temper, that is a sign of weakness. And I was like, okay. So first, I just have to recognize that if I lose my temper, that's a sign of weakness. And I like to consider myself to not be a weak person. I like to kind of be in control. So if I can learn to control my emotions, I can control my environment. And so it's just having the ability to recognize that. That's all it is. There is no like breathing technique. There's no like I do this, this, and this, and it gets my mind right. It's understanding how important that is. It's like people say, like, hey, like, what do I need to do to shift my mindset so I can change what I'm doing? And my answer is always, when it's important enough, you will decide to do it.
That's good. That's a good answer.
That is what I don't. You can't get. You don't need to be any more elaborate than that. When you recognize that your ability to communicate is one of the most important things that you can harness, because it'll save your marriage, it'll save your relationship with your kids, it'll save your relationship with your family. It will actually give you the ability to be a better performer at work and in business, therefore make more money, have the ability to tithe more to your church, and make a greater impact on your community because you're good at communicating. Then you'll put a little more time and effort into being a better communicator,
Yeah,
right? And
that's a
whether
great
that's
answer.
listening to podcasts or reading books or typing, right? And so I wanted to be better with articulating my words. And I was talking with Jocko, and he said, start writing. I said, okay. So I try to type or write something every day, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's short, sometimes it's a couple thousand words, right? If I've got a lot on my mind and I'm just trying to work through some stuff, I start typing, and I get into that rhythm. And for me, I tie it back into what we did in the military in training, right? In the SEAL teams, we trained all the time, and we trained so many repetitions where the basic skills became muscle memory. And we do things that we don't even think about. Well, one of the things that we're always doing is scanning, right? And I try to relate that to a conversation. So I'm scanning, I'm assessing my environment, right? I deem that there's a threat that's possibly coming. I'm going to get I'm going to go from my weapon being slung to now maybe it's like halfway up, or I'm tracking on that target because I'm able to assess. I don't just bring my gun up and start shooting, because if I do that, if you're at a distance and I shoot you and you don't have a weapon, guess what? I'm going to prison, right? Because that's murder. Right. And we don't kill people that don't have weapons or that aren't posing a threat to us. So I'm tracking on you. I'm ready to engage if I need to. And then once I can identify that you are a threat, I have the jump on you. I have the advantage because I'm assessing everything that's going on. You know, I don't want to get ambushed. I want to do the ambushing. Right. And so I've gotten from the flank or whatever I need to do. And so I engage. After we engage, we don't just put our gun away. And that's one of the things I hate is I see these shooting videos and guys are like, bop, 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 bop. They'll shoot and then they put their gun away like as fast as they can. Guys and girls, if you're listening to this, if you deem there to be a threat that requires your weapon out, it's a race to get the gun out, not to put the gun away. Right. Okay? So how does that relate to conversations? Yeah. If you have identified this conversation needing you to say this, this, and this, you have the assessment, right? You assess what you're going to say. You think about what you're going to say. And as you think about what you're going to say, you kind of have some idea as to what their counter could be or what they're going to say. And then therefore you could kind of come back and kind of dictate the conversation and have it in your control. I know this is a little sporadic right now, but bear with me on this, right? Yeah.
No, I'm with you.
And so it's the same, like, so I talk about having that weapon up, right? I'm engaging. Well, we scan after we shoot as well, right? We don't just put our gun away. We engage, we scan with the finger on the trigger, because if I need to re-engage again, I'm ready, right? But okay, scan, deep breath. That deep breath slows my heart rate down. Yeah. It enables me to kind of get that big picture, because I'm sure, I mean, I have, I don't know, maybe you have, or someone listening has ever said something out of anger, and that afterwards they're like, what just happened? Like, what did I just say? Or an argument where you can't recall the conversation because you were so amped up. Your heart rate was so high. Your blood pressure got up to it actually took away your ability to think and remember and, keep that information in there. Right. And so we scan after we shoot, and then we take the finger off the trigger. We look around, complete situational awareness. And then you put your gun down or your pistol back in the holster. And then you kind of bring your hands back up to where it's like looking around. Okay, cool. Threats eliminated. What's my next step? Yeah. So because we scan before, we're always assessing, and we scan afterwards, it gives us that advantage.
Yeah.
And I think the mistake that people make, especially men, is we are too quick to just blah, right, say something to say something so that we can dominate the conversation. And if, actuality, if we actually listened to what was being said and then reacted, we would have the advantage.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that Jocko is amazing at, is just listening and letting everybody talk and assessing everything. And then he'll be like, hey guys, Jocko here. It's like, oh, yeah, I know it's Jocko, but okay,
right.
Thanks, boss. And he'll be like, hey, and then he puts his info in, and you're like, okay,
yeah,
awesome.
Yeah.
Ties it all in. Perfect.
Well, one of the things I hear you saying in this conversation is, especially when it comes to communication, whether it's husband and wife, whether it's with other employees, your boss, congregations, pastors, parishioners, having these kind of conversations, is a lot of times what happens is we draw, we start firing, we put it away as quick as we can, and then we just kind of stand around like, now I handle all my business right there. And it's kind of like, hey, you never identified who the threat was. You never identified one single part of this. All you did was did your part in your mind of what you thought was right. And now you got people wounded everywhere. And you've got, everybody's just bullet riddled at this point, because you had no self-awareness to stop and say, am I in the right what I'm doing right now? Have I identified exactly what the problem is? Or did I see something I thought was scary and I fired off a bunch of stuff, and now I hurt somebody I love. I hurt somebody who's in charge of me. I've hurt somebody who I work with. I've hurt a friend, all because it's about me, my insecurity. So I hear what you're saying. Yeah, that's really good. And that's the thing you do. I'm telling you, JP, I from listening to your stuff, you're great at parabolizing all these kind of situations and then bringing them into focus. Was there some transition in that when you first kind of started realizing that, or has it been a common thing for you?
I think it's a common thing, but I'm more aware of it now, obviously, because of what I do every day.
Yeah.
This is what I do. So I'm able to look back and be like, okay, boom, 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 boom. But I will say I was decent at it because, Jocko, and Seth was the Delta Platoon commander when we deployed to Ramadi. So if someone's listened to Jocko's podcast or read the book, that's who Seth was. Unfortunately, he passed away a little over 2 years ago. But, Seth was really good at communication. Jocko was phenomenal. Leif's always been, really good as well. But I would say I was probably decent at it because they put me in a position of leadership when we deployed to Ramadi.
Yeah.
It was myself, Seth, and 5 other SEALs and an interpreter that went out to a forward operating base on the eastern side of Ramadi, and I got bumped into a position of leadership. And it wasn't because of my rank. I was the youngest and most junior ranking guy, and I got put in that position of leadership. So I would assume I had the ability to kind of do that. And then when I was in training as an instructor, I think I did a decent job at that. I have buddies that are like, hey man, I'll never forget. Like when I came to the block of training, you taught me this, this, and this. And I'm like, holy cow, I don't even remember that. That's cool.
Excellent.
And we're talking, 13 years later, 12 years later. And then, when I got out, I was doing sales at a financial company, and I did decent there. I think, I got promoted to sales manager within like 8 or 9 months of being there. And, I look back and I think, that transition was real rough for me. I did stuff and said stuff that I shouldn't have. And I acted, I really wish I could go back and just be like, hey guys, I'm sorry, let's do this over again.
Right.
And I know probably one of the guys I damaged a relationship with, because I'll reach out to him here and there on social media, and I never hear anything back from him. So I'm like almost to the point where like, it bothers me to where I want to fly out there and just go to the office and be like, hey man, I'm sorry. Like,
good for you.
I had a rough transition, blah, blah, blah. Now the other guys I talk with, they're super cool. Like we still have good working relationships and we communicate, but also here's the other thing. I don't know what this guy has going on in his life. So he could be going through some stuff, and I am the last thing on his priority as to what he needs to, talk about? I don't know. You know, he could be having some family problems or problems at work or problems with his kids. And like, why would he want to talk with me? So I try to detach and just, you know, realize, hey, you know, I need to make that right. But, you know, I think I did a decent job at being able to do that, because when I was doing sales, I had a good ability at just listening and communicating with clients and prospects. And I built really good relationships with my clients. And I was able to close deals that most new sales guys probably couldn't, but I was just able to talk and communicate and just listen and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to solve your problems. And here's why. And here's how. Like, this is what my company does. And people trusted me, I think. And that's the base of sales, right? People, you buy from people that you like and trust. Yeah. And I would, you know, I still have some of my old clients that reach out and say, hey man, hope you're doing well. Or, hey, my team's kind of going through these problems right now. You know, what do you think? And then I'm able to talk with them through it, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's excellent. I always have a question. I always have a question for the preachers. I always ask them, hey, when you read through Scripture, what's a story that you read that you find humor in? Like something that's in Scripture and you find humor in. I have a similar question, but a little different vein. And now listen, you got to understand, JP, my mind is a little broke. All right. And so there's these moments that I have, and I'm like, I wonder if other people are having similar moments. And so here's my question. What's the funniest conversation that you had with some of the guys that you've been on mission with? What are some of the funniest conversations you've had in the middle of a firefight? Is there such a thing?
Oh yeah. We were up on a rooftop in this building that we're in. And we're set up in Overwatch, and we'd engaged some enemy fighters, and they quickly figured out where we're at. And I just remember, well, I mean, dude, I have the video of it, which is pretty cool. There's video. I mean, dude, our building is just, you hear this like all the snap of the rounds like cracking over the rooftop, and then you hear them hitting the wall, like right behind me. If this was like a big like 12 to 18 inch like parapet wall up on the flat roof, and we're like crouched behind it, and you just hear like the bullets hitting the wall. RPGs got shot at the building, and they're exploding, and like all this stuff, and we're like laughing, and like the guys are like literally, we're in tears laughing. We're like, man, somebody's upset down there. And like my buddy pulls out this thing, he's just like, and he starts packing his dip. And he's like, man, this would be a really good commercial for this company if they wanted to sponsor me during deployments. He takes out a big lip and puts it in, and he like holds up the can. He says something like as like a tagline for the commercial, like puts it back in his pouch. And then like, there's a little lull. So he gets done doing that, and then he gets up over the wall, and he's like, bah, 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 and starts like shooting his gun, and it's all on video. I just remember I was like just laughing, laughing so hard.
Copenhagen.
It was
when you're in a pinch.
It was Copenhagen. It was something along those lines. And then Seth a couple times. It was so funny. He would always try to, you know, so when you're overseas, you're on base. You know, they have like local vendors that are selling stuff or whatever. And like, they're always like, for you, I got a good deal for you. You know, and you're like, yeah, okay. And it's like, hey, I got these, you know, they sell these DVD sets, and they're all like pirated copies, and they're like super crappy. Like, you buy it, you come back, and you're like, hey man, these don't work. I want my money back. And they're like, well, no, it was a good set. And you're like, hey, I want my money back. Like, for you, I'll give you your money back, my friend. And it's just like it's just, they're always saying for you, my friend. Right. And so we'd be up on a rooftop, and you know, we'd engage somebody, or you know, we'd be getting shot at, and Seth, our platoon commander, would be like, for you, my friend, I got a special treat for you. And then I would like shoot somebody, and it was just like this funny thing, like you're engaging enemy fighters, and he'd be talking like, I got something for you, my friend, and then we would engage.
That's good. That's good stuff.
The rest of the stuff we laugh about, I can't talk about. So
yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Well, the reason I asked that question is I think sometimes what happens with a lot of people in lines of work where things get very, very serious, like we have this thing about us that like we got to find the funny in the dark places. Like you've got to be able to. I mean, otherwise you don't Otherwise, you can't hardly survive. You can't hardly survive what's going on. You can't be under that much stress, that much pressure. And here's what I know for preachers. Preachers get in that situation. And I say this all the time. Police officers, firefighters, EMTs, doctors, nurses, military guys, some of the most unhealthy people, in the world. I mean, it's just as far as just learning how to function, because they're so good at taking care of other people and taking care of business and doing the things and being proactive and doing that they really lose a piece of them in the process. And I would tell you, it's happening at a pretty astonishing rate right now, where ministers are falling out of ministry. They're bailing out on churches. They're into depression. Suicide rate for ministers is going up. And that's just crazy.
Really?
Which is just crazy. It's just absolutely crazy.
Insane.
But part of the thing is that it goes back to a very similar mindset of, hey, do you have friends? Do you laugh? Did you forget how to be a man? You remember when we were kids, we built clubhouses and we said no girls allowed, and we isolated and we laughed about stuff, and we used to do these things, and we had these hobbies, and we had these places we went. We always played baseball, or we climbed up, or we always played war, or we always played cowboys and Indians, or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And what happens is we come through life and we get responsibilitized to the point to where we no longer know how to function like dudes, like laughing back and forth and having conversations and learning how to get healthy and stop worrying about everybody else for just a minute and go ahead and take the pulse on where you're at. Are you okay? Are you okay? What can you speak to in that same thing? Transition for you, coming from being overseas and deployed and then back to civilian life, or even in and then retired?
So
is that the right word?
No. So retired is if you do 20 plus years,
Gotcha.
Unless you get medically retired from the military, meaning that they're like, hey, you're medically unfit to do your job because of what has happened to you in the service. We are going to medically retire you and you're down.
Gotcha.
I got out at just under 12 years. It's just, I got out, right?
Gotcha.
So I served.
Gotcha.
I did my time.
Thanks for clearing that.
So easy day. I did three deployments, 2 to Iraq, 1 to Afghanistan. When I was as an instructor, there's times, I wasn't very happy being there. I'd rather be deployed. I'd rather be overseas, but I was there for a reason. And Jocko had those conversations with me, and he's like, hey, you need to change your attitude, your mindset, man. Like, yes, I would love for you to be overseas right now, but that's not your job. Your job is to be the absolute best instructor so we can prepare these guys to go to war and them all come home. So we don't have to put our dress blue uniform on to go to another effing funeral. Yeah. All right. And then we have to take our tridents off our chest and put those into another casket. That's your job. And that conversation meant more to me than most had in my young adult life, right? Yeah. And it really reshaped how I looked at what I was doing and shifted my focus. And, I would like to believe I was a good instructor until the day I got out. I tried to be the best instructor possible. When we'd come back from a long, hard block of training where we'd been on the road for 4, 5, 6 weeks. And, we're just going. And a group, of guys that were getting ready to deploy to Afghanistan were like, hey, we'd like to go do some training up in the mountains, but they had to have an instructor there, right? You have to have a range safety officer and someone from TRADET. And whenever those came about, I would be like, yeah, I'll go, man. Did I want to be up there? No. Did I want to be up there? Yeah. There's a little bit of both, right? Yeah. And I really had to understand that the priority was, dude, these brave men that are deploying to Afghanistan in a month or two. Like, I'm back here in the United States, like chilling in San Diego, traveling, getting per diem, going to go work out, do whatever. These guys are literally going to go live in the mountains of Afghanistan, getting attacked and attacking every single day. Yeah, I can get off my little comfort, chair and go serve these men, right? Yeah. And so when I found that I was trying to serve others, I had much more fulfillment.
That's a good answer.
And when people lose sight of their ability to serve others, that's when depression starts to creep in because they have no fulfillment, right?
Yeah.
They're just doing the mundane tasks, the day-to-day thing. And that's why I have so much fulfillment with what I do, is because I know I am serving and I am helping and I am doing something to contribute to people every single time I travel. That's what makes it easy for me to be on the road so much. I mean, I love my wife. I love my kids. I like to be around them. If there's any other job, there's no way. You would have to pay me like $15 million a year plus for me to be gone as much as I am, for it to even make sense. I mean, honestly, like it would be some ridiculous number that no company is going to ever pay, right? It's just going to happen. Right? So I'm like, cool. But I love what I do with Echelon Front.
Is that transition at home? Is that transition at home a difficult thing when you come off and you say, okay, so now I need to turn off. I need to turn off and I need to be present.
Yeah, it is. It has been. Dave Burke wrote an article it was called Our Platoon Space that we have at Echelon Front, where if you go to echelonfront.com, you can find Platoon Space, and it's like different articles guys have written. And he wrote one about just finding that balance. And when you're home, and you're present 100%, right? And he's really good at that.
Yeah.
Like he'll even put his phone on do not disturb mode during certain times of the day when he's with his kids doing stuff, which is pretty cool.
That's real cool.
And like when he's driving, he's talking with the kids and playing with the kids and his wife. Like he's not doing anything else.
Not answering emails and all the other stuff.
He's present, man, which is really cool. So there is a struggle. There is that, difficulty. When I first got out and I transitioned out, excuse me, I had a really hard time because I failed to reestablish my mission. Like I didn't, have clarity in what I was doing and that I was serving others. Yeah, I was making money for my family, but there was not that fulfillment. And I went through a real dark time and, did stuff I'm not proud of, said stuff I'm not proud of. And it was solely because I was upset with where I was at and what I was doing. And I didn't have that camaraderie. Now, I tried to fill that void with doing jiu-jitsu and MMA, and I fought. I did amateur MMA, so I had some fights, which really helped because I had that camaraderie, that bond, that hard training, that hard just times with other guys. But I had to find a balance because when I was doing that, I was way out of balance with time with my family. Right.
Sure.
And so, I'm in a great mood. I'm prepping for this fight. I'm training. I fight. I win.
Yeah.
I did pretty decent. It was 6-1 as an amateur fighter.
Yeah. But it's costing you. It's costing you in the long run in other places.
Absolutely. Right. And so just being able to try to find that balance. And, I found that when I'm communicating with Amanda, we have much more clarity on what each other needs, right? And when she knows that I need to go work out or go train, she's like, hey, go to the gym, go train. And the nice thing is our whole family does jiu-jitsu.
That's awesome.
When we're at the gym together. And when I'm on the road, Amanda tries to get the kids there, and that's great. And when I'm home, it's like, hey, we're definitely going. But it's just, comes down to us actually talking and understanding what each other needs. And me also being aware and understanding that Amanda's not going to say, hey, I need this. Right. Like your wife isn't getting those little subtle hints that you're getting when you're like, man, it's very clear to me. And it should be very clear to you that I want to have sex, but it's not clear to her.
Right.
We have to also realize that, we're going to be doing all these hints and making these suggestions that they're not going to catch, or they're just choosing to, ignore because they have other stuff on their mind. And maybe they're also wanting us just to straight up say it, right?
Yeah. Like, hey, right.
Say you want to have sex. Okay, cool. Yeah. But so the flip side to that is, I mean, maybe it's different for you or for other people listening, but most wives, when the guys that I've talked to, their wives aren't telling them, I need this.
Right.
Because the wives are expecting the men to know that and or be aware of that and to lead, right? Women want to be led by their men.
Yeah. Thank you for saying
they
that.
They do.
You're 100% right.
And there's nothing wrong with that, right? women want to be led by men, by their partners. And, you think about all the stupid arguments people get into, and it's just like, well, what do you want to go eat? I don't care. And then there's like this, you end up getting into a stupid argument over where you go eat, when it's like, instead, like, guess what? There's 5 restaurants in this area that I know my wife really likes. So instead of me saying, hey, where do you want to go eat? I'm like, hey, would you like to go to Hanabi tonight for sushi? Yeah, cool. Let's go.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get, and if she says, I don't know, I'm like, are you in the mood for Mexican? Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's go to Chewy's then. Right.
Yeah,
I'm just like picking and dictating.
Not getting hung up in the, what does she think, or what is, all this kind of thing. Yeah. I think that's good advice. One of the things we talk about with a group of men here at the church is, if you find that your wife is having a hard time following, if your wife seems to have a hard time following what's going on and what you're wanting inside your home, it might be due to the fact that she has not been able to find an identifiable leader.
It's not a might. That's a 100%. And I know you're being a smart aleck by saying that.
Right.
But it is 100%.
She can't.
That they don't have a clear leader.
Right.
Your job is to lead.
Yeah.
You know what? Her job is to also lead. And you have to empower her to lead.
Yes.
If you want your team to take ownership, you have to take ownership.
Yeah. A lot of people would say that faith or Christianity is a passive answer to a violent world. What's your thoughts on that?
Let me make sure I heard you 100%. Say that one more time, please.
That faith or Christianity is a passive answer to a violent world, meaning it doesn't bear the weight. It doesn't bear the weight to participate inside of the world as it is now. As culture has shifted, Christianity, faith, all that has just moved to the outside. It has no bearing on life anymore. What would you say to that?
I'd say that's not true.
Yeah.
And if somebody does believe that, it's because of weak individuals being the as to who they assume Christians are.
Yeah.
Right. And so if there's a few people on social media that on Facebook that I'm friends with, that I've really struggled with back and forth on either just unfollowing them or just reaching out. And I think this is what I should do, is reaching out and saying, hey, man, you have a platform. You have a good amount of followers. And you are throwing up mixed signals to everybody that follows you. Because one post, you're talking about things that I don't think a husband should talk about their wife on social media.
Yeah.
And, saying these, different comments about her body and sexually and what you guys do and did and, all this other stuff.
Right.
And then literally the next day or that same day later on, you'll make some post about your faith and being a Christian.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's one or the other. And you're showing up mixed signals, and if people look at you and think that's an example of a Christian man, then you're not showing them what the true example is. You're not living your life Christ-like.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: I am not casting stones and being judgmental in regards to me acting like my life is together, because my life is not. It is. It's at times it's really good, and at times it's a train wreck. But I'm at least conscious of it. Yeah. And I want to make sure I'm not saying or doing things that contradict each other, right? So I'm pretty consistent with what I post and put out there. And I'm pretty consistent with how I actually live my life.
Right, right.
And so, I don't think anybody would look at me as a weak individual.
Right.
When it comes to what I believe. I believe in God. I believe in the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
I believe that I had angels and protection on every one of my deployments and my whole life. And my parents have prayed that over me. My parents have prayed that over me. My grandmother still continues to every single day wake up and pray over each individual in our family before she starts the day. And there are times where she's texted me a scripture that could not have been more spot on for what I needed in my life. And I know that is because she is in tune with God and the Holy Spirit and what we need in our lives. No question, right?
Yeah.
And so I know these are facts. I also know that Christian men and women are called to be bold and to stand up in our faith. And now there's this culture of, well, I don't want to offend somebody.
Right.
You know? And you know what? You know, because we allow and we allow things that, you know, are contrary to our beliefs. And, you know, if in the Bible, and if you're sitting there and your beliefs are that marriage is supposed to be between a man and a woman, and you're a pastor and that's what you believe, that's your faith and that's your foundation, yet you're going to go marry men together or women together, then why are they going to listen to anything else that you have to say?
Right.
Like, I'm sorry, like you have to be consistent with one or the other.
100%.
And, you know, and I feel like I'm kind of digressing.
No, you're good. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
But it's just examples that we set, right? And so if we're allowing people to push us over, if we're allowing things to change in our culture and society without actually stepping up and saying something, then that's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, that's good. I appreciate that. You know, I think about a guy like you, trained to do what you've been trained to do, and going out and being faithful to carry out the missions that you've been given, and you holding your faith close to you, and living through that. And here's another thing that I really appreciate about you: your transparency on how to live your life. That's something that preachers could really learn from. That's something preachers could really learn from, especially a lot of the ones that I know. That transparency.
And it's okay to stumble.
See,
it's okay and that's what you're talking about. It's okay. You know, and that's why, like, it blows my mind that you're saying that there's an increasing rate of pastors killing themselves. Well, the reason why is because of pressure that they put upon themselves.
Bingo.
Because of the way the world has changed. Social media is a very real thing, right? Well, social media is also a very fake thing. People can live whatever life they want to make up on social media, and people believe that to be the base and the foundation of how they should live their lives.
Yeah.
No, you live your own life, right? And so these pastors need to realize that, hey, you know what? There's only been one person that lived a life without sin. One.
It wasn't
right?
You. Right.
It wasn't you.
Yeah.
It's the guy you're talking about.
Uh-huh.
It's the guy that you're trying to emulate.
Yeah.
But you're going to fall short, and that's okay. It is just part of it. And if you're not, you know, falling short, then that means that you're actually not living your life the way that you're supposed to live your life, because you're not pushing yourself.
Yeah.
You're not stepping outside of your comfort zone. You're not failing. Now, if you're habitually failing in areas of your life that you shouldn't be failing in, that's a different.
Yeah, come on.
The different.
What do I need? What do I need? What do I need in my life, JP? I find myself habitually failing in the same area over and over. What's the 1, 2, 3 things I need to move into my life to help me get past that?
Well, one, you need accountability. You keep making the same mistakes because nobody's holding you accountable. Like, one, you should hold yourself accountable. 2, you should have a group of individuals that are going to hold you accountable for your actions. They're going to have those hard conversations with you, right? One of the things I've been trying to do when I do jujitsu is to not look at the clock when we're rolling, right? If we're drilling if we're rolling, is just to not look at the clock, because in my mind, that's a sign of weakness, because I'm looking to see how much time do I have until I get a break, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now what I do is I penalize myself with burpees or a hard workout. So I keep track of the amount of times I look at the clock in the evening, and then I will do some sort of a penalty workout either that evening or the next day to make it to where I think about that and I don't do it again. So
that's excellent.
If you're falling short and you're doing something, you need to penalize yourself, because without a penalty, you're not going to change. You're not going to shift, right? You actually need to say, oh, when I do this, that's a bad thing. And when I do bad things, there's consequences for my actions. If you got to drive around all the time and speed and you never got a speeding ticket, would you ever drive the speed limit?
Right. No, heck no.
Who would?
No one.
But you know why I drive the speed limit?
Because I ain't trying to pay for it and explain it when I get home.
Because I don't want to pay for the ticket.
That's right.
I don't want it. It's not because dude, I'm a good driver. I've been to driving schools and racing schools. I can drive as fast as my vehicle will let me, and I'm going to be okay. Because I know in different environments what the threshold is, right? And I will push that machine to the threshold the whole time and be okay. I'm not worried about hurting myself or hurting somebody else. What I'm worried about is paying money.
I got a wife with kids. We went to buy basketball shoes. I ain't trying to drop $150 on a ticket.
Yeah, my son is 13 and wears size 14 shoes. You know how many shoes he's burned through in the last year and a half?
Yeah.
You know how many almost brand new pairs of shoes we've given away? He's switching funny. Through that every 2 months. No, it's not funny. Every 2 months we're buying new shoes, man.
Well, hey,
hey, there needs to be accountability. So, there needs to be accountability. You need to be mature enough and man enough or woman enough, or I should say adult enough, to hold yourself accountable. Because if you're not going to, who's going to?
Right.
Nobody. If you're not going to take action, who's going to? If you're not going to take ownership to lead yourself and lead your teams, who's going to take ownership? The answer is no one. Right. So until you decide to take ownership of your life, take ownership of your consequences for making bad decisions, to hold yourself accountable, to get a group of guys or girls, if there's women listening to this group, guys, I don't suggest having other women hold you accountable for your actions. Have men hold yourself accountable. Right. Women have women hold yourself accountable for your actions. Then nothing's going to change. Yeah. Nothing is going to change.
Yeah.
So it's until you decide that you want to make it happen.
JP Dinnell, my buddy, you are knocking it out of the park. This is excellent dialogue. Love what you're doing. Thank you so much for your service. Thank you so much for what you do with Echelon Front. Here's my hope. I hope at some point, when there's a muster, me and one of my partners can break free and make it down. I would love to meet you face to face. Love to come in.
That'd be awesome.
Take part in something like that. That's excellent. So
yeah, we should be releasing the dates soon, but we have 3 musters in the United States in 2020, and they're in pretty decent areas to be able to travel to, so it'll be good.
I saw one in Dallas. I can't remember where the other 2, Arizona, and I can't remember what the other one was. Orlando. That's what it was. Yeah.
Yep. Orlando. So they did release them.
I saw the 3. Those are the 3 I saw.
Nice. Yep. That's where we're at.
Excellent. JP Dinnell, thank you so much for being on the Homiless Podcast, buddy. I appreciate this.
I appreciate it. Yeah, and if anybody wants to follow me on social media, it's pretty simple. It's on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. It's all the same. It's at JP Dinnell. So at JPDINNELL. So if you want to follow me on there, interact with me on there, that's usually the easiest way to do it. If you want to learn more about what we do at Echelon Front, it's echelonfront.com. So that's ECHELONFRONT.com, or to gain more information on the musters, because they will sell out. Everyone has sold out. People are like, oh, well, let me wait. Nope, they're going to sell out.
Right.
It's extremeownership.com. Extremeownership.com. Very simple. And hey, remember, you can make excuses or you can make things happen. You can't do both.
That's awesome. JP Dinnell, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it, man.
I'll catch up with you later on.
Sounds good.
Thank you for listening to the Homiless Podcast. I appreciate JP Dinnell and his willingness to jump on here and have this conversation. Some good, deep stuff. So appreciate that a bunch. If you've got some other names that you want me to look into, some guys you want me to chase down, try to get a conversation with, let me know. Email me at thehomilist@gmail.com. That's thehomilist, THEHOMILIST @gmail.com. And you can check us out at the website as well, thehomilist.com. All right. Thanks for listening.